The day Clara was sold, a stranger offered her something no one else ever did, a way back to herself. Before we begin, come into your country so I know where this story is reaching. Dawn crawled over Redwater Valley in thin blue light, the kind that makes every shadow look sharper than it should. The auction bell had barely stopped ringing when Clara Weston was pushed forward, keyed down, hair unbrushed, fingers knotted together to hide the trembling. The dusty plank stage felt colder than it looked, and the small crowd circled like they were browsing tools, not people. She didn't cry. That part of her had dried up months ago. Over the murmurs, the narrator's voice feels like a slow pan across the sign boots, scraping, wind scraping. Her father's voice cracked the stillness. She works hard. Don't ask for more. Clara's gaze stayed fixed on the ground until she heard one pair of footsteps approach, steady, unhurried. No swagger, no judgment. When she finally lifted her eyes, a quiet rancher with a weather-lined face simply tipped his hat. "I'm not buying a worker," he said softly, "just offering someone a place where she can breathe." The crowd shifted. Clara's breath caught. Why would a stranger care whether she breathed at all? The wagon wheels groaned as they rolled away from Redwater, each turn sounding like a page tearing out of Clara's old life. The rancher, Leas Marrow, didn't speak much. He kept his eyes on the long road ahead, shoulders squared, jaw working like he was chewing on 100 thoughts and swallowing all of them. Clara sat stiff beside him, hands folded tight. She wasn't naive. Men rarely took someone to give them a place to breathe. But Eliza's silence wasn't the cruel kind. It was the kind that felt careful, like he didn't want to step on something fragile. The sun lifted higher, turning the prairies gold. Grass rippled in slow waves, and Clara's heartbeat finally settled into something steady, almost unfamiliar. After an hour, Elias finally spoke. "You won't owe me anything," he said, eyes still forward. "Just help where you can. Rest when you need." Clara blinked. Rest, help, not obey. It didn't fit any script she knew. They passed a stretch of open land where a crooked cabin sat, lone near an old cottonwood tree. Smoke curled from the chimney, soft and thin. "That place saved me once," Elias murmured. "Maybe it can save you, too." His voice wasn't pity. It was memory. And Clara felt the first ember of curiosity. What had broken him? And why did he believe she still deserved mending? The first thing Clara noticed when they stepped inside the cabin was the light. Not bright, not warm, just honest. It slid through the crooked window panes in thin stripes, landing on a table scarred by years of use and a row of tin cups, dented from small hands. There were children here, 3 of them, a quiet girl near the hearth, plaiting strands of twine, a boy with a mop of blonde hair, trying badly to sweep flour into a pile, and the youngest, barely steady on his feet, clung to Elias's pant leg like a burr. Clara froze. Elias hadn't mentioned little ones. He knelt, brushing the dust from the youngest boy's cheek. "This is Clara," he said gently. "She'll be staying for a while." The girl's eyes lifted, first curious, not wary. The older boy glanced at Clara's worn boots, then her tired face, then back to the mess he'd been pretending to clean. He didn't speak, but he didn't hide either. Clara swallowed hard. She had no idea how to speak to children, no idea what they expected: warmth, politeness, a mother's steadiness she'd never learned to copy. But the littlest one solved everything. He toddled straight toward her, lifted both arms, and whispered the smallest, simplest request. "Up." Her throat tightened. Elias watched, quiet as a held breath. Clara hesitated, then reached down. The child fit against her chest like he'd been waiting. Clara woke before the rooster the next morning. Not because she meant to impress anyone, but because her mind wouldn't sit still. The cabin was quiet, fire dim, children breathing softly, Elias already outside splitting wood. She stepped into the cool dawn, the air sharp enough to sting her lungs. Elias paused mid-swing when he saw her. "Didn't expect you up yet." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. He nodded once, set the axe aside, and motioned toward the yard. "Walk with me a minute." They passed the old cottonwood tree, its branches creaking like an old woman stretching awake. The land rolled out around them wild, open, untouched. Clara felt small against it, but not in the crushing way she had felt back home. This smallness felt spacious. Elias stopped at a half-finished fence line. "This place has been too quiet," he said. "Kids do what they can. I do what I can. But there's holes everywhere, not just in the boards." Clara's pulse stumbled. Was he asking her to fix something she didn't know how to fix? But Elias wasn't looking at the fence. He was looking at her not with expectation, not with demand, but with a question he was too careful to voice. "Clara," he said gently, "do you feel safe here?" No one had ever asked her that, not once in her entire life, and that single question cracked something open inside her she didn't know she'd been holding shut. Clara didn't answer right away. The word safe felt too large, too foreign. Safety wasn't something she'd ever owned. It was something she watched other women tuck into their aprons like spare buttons. But here, with the wind brushing through the cottonwood, she realized her shoulders weren't tight, her breath wasn't shallow, her pulse wasn't racing. "Think I could be," she said carefully, "if I'm given time." Elias nodded once, like that was all he needed. No pressure, no rescuing, just room. When they returned to the cabin, the children were awake, hair messy, cheeks warm, arguing softly over who got the bigger tin cup of oats. Clara stepped into the kitchen without thinking, took the pot from the stove, and ladled out breakfast. The room shifted. Small eyes watched her, not with suspicion, but with hope. Elias leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. Yet the air between them had changed. Not romantic, not rushed, just steady, like a bridge being built, one quiet plank at a time. As she wiped a smear of oats from the youngest boy's cheek, she felt something stir in her chest. Belonging, frightening, fragile, but real enough to notice. And that was the moment she realized. The ranch wasn't asking her to fill a missing place. It was offering her one. By midsummer, the cabin felt different, not neater, just steadier. Clara found herself moving through the days with hands that no longer shook. She mended shirts, learned which squeaky board woke which child, and figured out how to keep the kettle from boiling over. The small victories mattered more than she expected. One afternoon, she stepped outside to hang laundry. The sky was wide and bright, the breeze warm enough to lift the sheets like sails. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like it was closing in on her. It felt open, possible. Elias was repairing the chicken coop nearby, sleeves rolled, sun catching the dust on his forearms. He glanced up when he heard her hum under her breath. "You sang?" he said, surprised. Clara flushed. "Only when I forget to be careful." Elias leaned on the fence rail, a faint smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. "You don't have to be careful here." The words weren't romantic, they were grounding. A quiet permission to stop bracing for harm. A sheet snapped in the wind, casting her face in soft shadow. For a moment, something eased inside her so deeply that she forgot she'd ever lived differently. By late August, evenings at the ranch took on a rhythm Clara had never known. Soft lantern glow, children's voices settling like dust after a long day, and the quiet thud of Elias's boots on the porch as he checked the sky for weather. The land seemed to breathe slower at dusk, and Clara found herself matching its pace. One evening, after the children drifted to sleep in a pile of quilts, Clara stepped outside to cool her mind. The horizon blushed with fading orange, the kind that makes the world feel suspended between what was and what could be. She sat on the porch steps, twisting a loose thread from her skirt, the way she always did when thoughts grew heavy. Elias joined her without a word, lowering himself beside her with the tired sigh of a man finally allowed to stop moving. "You're settling in," he said quietly. "I'm learning," she replied. He nodded, eyes fixed on the far hills. "Learning is enough," Quicken chirped. Another answered. The silence between them wasn't awkward, was gentle, careful. The kind that lets two worn-out souls rest without explanation. Then Elia said something she didn't expect. "I don't look at you as someone passing through." Clara's breath caught, not out of fear, but something far more dangerous to the walls she'd built. Hope. The next morning began quietly, the kind of calm that made Clara uneasy without knowing why. She moved through chores with a steady pace, fetching water, slicing bread, brushing crumbs from the children's cheeks. But something in the air felt different, lighter, expectant, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Around midday, a knock tapped softly at the door. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. On the porch stood Mrs. Adler, the widowed seamstress who lived 2 ridges over. She held a small, wrapped bundle. "I heard there's a woman here now," she said with a warm, knowing smile. "A good one." Clara blinked, unsure how the news traveled so quickly. Mrs. Adler placed the bundle in her hands. "Thought you might want this. Every home needs something made with care." Inside was a simple patchwork tablecloth, sun-faded, but beautifully stitched. Not new, not fancy, but chosen, offered. Clara swallowed hard. No one had ever given her something just because they thought she deserved to have it. Elias stepped behind her, resting one hand lightly on the doorframe. He met Clara's eyes for a moment that said everything words couldn't. The world had finally started seeing her as someone worth keeping. Clara spread the patchwork tablecloth across the wooden table that evening, smoothing it gently as if it was something fragile and living. The colors, faded blues, sun-worn reds, soft creams, brought a warmth to the room the cabin hadn't known before. The children circled around her, studying it with wide eyes. "It's pretty," the little girl whispered. "It makes the room feel alive," Clara replied, surprised at how true the words felt. Elias paused in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. Something in his expression shifted: quiet pride, quiet relief, quiet something deeper. He stepped inside, brushing dirt from his palms. "Looks right at home," he said softly. Clara felt her throat tighten. The tablecloth wasn't just a gift. It was a sign, a marker that she wasn't an outsider anymore. Not a burden, not a temporary fixture. As they sat for supper, sunlight slid through the windows in long amber stripes, touching the cloth, their hands, their faces. Clara hadn't been part of a family meal in years, yet here she was, laughing lightly as the children passed bread. Feeling the warmth of Elias's gaze settle on her like a promise. She didn't dare name the feeling blooming in her chest, but she knew this for the first time in her life. She wasn't waiting to be pushed out. She was already home.